There's a specific kind of silence that hurts more than any argument ever could. Not the silence of an empty room, not the silence after a fight, but the silence that falls when you walk in and you know, somehow, in the marrow of your bones, that your name was just in someone's mouth. Someone you trusted, someone you let close. You didn't hear it directly, you never do. It comes to you the way a cold wind finds a crack in the wall, quietly, indirectly, from a direction you never expected. A friend mentions something you never told them. A colleague looks at you a half-second too long. The group chat slows when you join. And then someone, with that particular kind of uncomfortable kindness, tells you, not everything, just enough. And in that moment, the ground shifts. It is not the words that wound you. It's the architecture behind them. The idea that while you were laughing with this person, confiding in them, maybe even defending them to others, they were constructing a version of you in someone else's mind. A version you never agreed to. A version built in the dark, without you in the room. That feeling has no clean name. It's not quite anger. It's not quite grief. It sits somewhere between the two. A hollow burn, a strange disbelief that someone you allowed into your interior world used that access against you. But here's what most people never ask in that moment of pain. They ask what was said. They ask who else knows. They ask, was any of it true? The mind spirals through these questions like it's trying to patch a wall that's already crumbled. The real question, the one that unlocks something far more important, is this. What kind of psychology produces this behavior? What is actually happening inside a person who chooses to discuss another human being in their absence, not with concern, not with care, but with contempt? Because once you understand that, the betrayal doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It stops being a verdict about you. It starts being a window into them. Let's begin with something uncomfortable and honest. Talking about people who aren't present is not a flaw unique to broken individuals. It is, at its core, a deeply human behavior. For most of human history, our survival was bound to our community. Trust was not a luxury, it was intelligence. Knowing who kept their promises, who took more than they gave, who could be relied on in crisis, this was literally life or death information. So our brains evolved to do exactly that, to track people, to evaluate them, to discuss their behavior when they're absent. The moment someone leans in and says, "Did you hear about?" your mind sharpens automatically. Not because you're shallow, because socially relevant information has always mattered. This is important to understand before we go any further. Not every conversation about an absent person is a betrayal. There is a genuine difference between sharing information and destroying character, between discussing behavior and attacking identity, between genuine concern, "Just be careful, he's been unreliable lately," and something far colder, "She's fake, he's pathetic, you can't trust a thing about her." Same human wiring, completely different motive. And it is the motive, the why beneath the words, that reveals everything. When someone consistently talks behind others' backs, when it's not occasional and contextual, but habitual and almost compulsive, you are no longer witnessing normal social bonding. You are witnessing a psychological strategy, a system of emotional regulation that this person has, often unconsciously, developed over years. And at the center of that system, almost always, is something fragile. If you strip the behavior down past all its social layers, one pattern emerges with striking consistency: unstable self-worth. Not low self-esteem in the obvious sense. Many chronic gossipers appear confident. Some are charismatic, even magnetic. They seem comfortable in rooms. They hold conversations easily. but internally their sense of value is built on sand. It shifts with every comparison, every perceived slight, every moment someone else receives attention they believed they deserved. Psychology has a term for what often drives this: downward comparison. It's the mental act of placing someone below you to temporarily feel more secure in your own position. When someone feels inadequate, when their self-image is quietly threatening to collapse under the weight of their own insecurity, one of the fastest routes to relief is to mentally or socially diminish someone else. "She's not that talented." That sentence isn't really about you. It's scaffolding. It's the person speaking, quietly, desperately, holding up the weight of their own self-doubt with borrowed lumber from your reputation. "He only got that because of connections." That's not analysis. That's a survival mechanism. If your success can be explained away, theirs doesn't seem so small. The uncomfortable truth is this: some people were never taught how to build self-worth from the inside. They were raised in environments where value was comparative, where being good was only meaningful if someone else was worse, where love was conditional on performance, where security came not from being enough, but from being more than. For those people, self-esteem is not a foundation. It is a ladder. And the only way they know how to climb is by quietly pulling others down. The relief this provides is real. That's the important part to understand. In the moment of gossip, there is a genuine psychological release, a nervous system that momentarily settles because the hierarchy feels restored, because the gap between them and you has, in their minds' accounting, been closed. But it never lasts. That's why the behavior repeats. That's why there is always someone new to criticize. The lift is borrowed, not earned, and borrowed lifts always require repayment. There is another layer beneath insecurity, and it is harder for people to admit even to themselves. It carries a particular kind of shame. The emotion is envy, and not the soft, passing kind. Envy in its deeper form whispers something that the ego finds almost unbearable. You have something I want, and I hate that you have it. Not just that I want it, that you specifically having it feels like a wound. Western culture permits many dark emotions. Anger is acceptable. Frustration is understandable. Even resentment has a kind of social tolerance. But envy, real envy, implies something that cuts the ego, that you are less than someone else in a way that you cannot currently fix. So instead of acknowledging that, the mind does something extraordinarily clever and profoundly dishonest. It converts the envy into criticism. It reframes your strength as a flaw. Your confidence becomes arrogance. Your visibility becomes attention-seeking. Your ease becomes fakeness. Your success becomes luck, or worse, manipulation. This is not random distortion. It is psychological equalizing. The mind, unable to elevate the speaker to your level, begins the architectural work of lowering yours. And here is what makes it particularly painful. The gossip is often loudest in the wake of your growth, when you accomplish something, when others begin to notice you. When you carry yourself differently than you once did, that is precisely when certain people feel what psychologists describe as identity threat. Your progress casts a shadow over their stagnation, and rather than face that shadow, they attempt to eclipse you. So when someone begins to talk behind your back after a period of your growth, after a success, after a visible change, do not search yourself for what you did wrong.
Search the timing. It will tell you everything. But insecurity and envy do not fully account for all of it. There is a third current running beneath this behavior, and it is perhaps the most quietly sad of all. For some people, talking critically about others is not about status or relief. It is about belonging. It is the only intimacy they know how to create. Think about what shared criticism produces in a social moment. The moment one person leans in with a lowered voice and begins to discuss a third person, something happens in the room. An invisible wall goes up. We become defined. They become the subject. And in that sudden enclosure, a fast, shallow, but very real sense of alliance is born. Psychologists call this coalition bonding, forming closeness through a shared target rather than through mutual vulnerability, genuine humor, or authentic shared values. It is a shortcut to the feeling of connection, and for individuals who desperately want to belong but lack the emotional tools to build depth, it is often the only shortcut they have learned. Because here is what most people miss about the habitual gossip in their life. The content is not the point. You are not the point. The stories, the critiques, the carefully delivered revelations, these are not actually about whoever is being discussed. They are social currency. They are traded for attention, for relevance, for the momentary warmth of being included. And this means something crucial that most people never consider. If someone gossips with you freely, openly, as a form of connection, they are almost certainly doing the same with others, with you as the subject. Not because they dislike you specifically, but because in this relational framework, everyone is eventually the material. The role of audience and subject simply rotates. Connection built on someone else's absence is not real connection. It is a stage set. And eventually, every stage set collapses.
And once you see all of this clearly, the insecurity, the envy, the borrowed intimacy, something inside you begins to quietly reorganize. The pain does not vanish, but its meaning changes. Because you start to realize that the narrative someone built about you in your absence was never really about you. It was a mirror they held up to themselves, and your name just happened to be written on the frame. Their words were never data about your worth. They were symptoms of their wound. This is not a small shift. This is everything. Because gossip, when heard enough times, even indirectly, even in fragments, has a way of seeping inward. Doubt enters quietly. You begin adjusting yourself around a story you never wrote. You make yourself smaller in rooms where you once stood naturally. You start editing your personality to avoid becoming someone's next subject. Understanding breaks that cycle. Not forgiving immediately, not excusing the behavior, not pretending the betrayal didn't land, but simply refusing to absorb someone else's psychological struggle as a truth about your identity. You are not what someone said about you in a room you weren't in. You are what you have quietly survived, what you have chosen despite the weight, what you have built in the hours no one was watching. The people who speak loudest about others in their absence are often the most silent with themselves, unable to sit with their own reflection long enough to heal what's broken inside. That is their work, not yours. Your work is simpler and harder. To remain open in a world that sometimes punishes openness. To trust carefully, but not become closed. To protect your energy without building walls so high that genuine connection can no longer reach you. Healing from betrayal does not mean becoming guarded. It means becoming discerning. And that is not a loss. That is maturity arriving, quietly, painfully, and right on time. If this felt like something you needed to hear today, you are not alone in what you have carried. This channel exists for exactly these moments. Subscribe and stay close.